Hi, welcome to the second module for third grade. My name is Debbie Thompson.
I'm Lynette Charlo.
And we're hopefully that these modules, as we go through and do them, that they are giving you some pretty good information. We've been getting feedback that they have been helpful. Hopefully we'll be able to get into even some more math for each module as we go along. But we do want to give you some extra information just from being able to go out and talk to teachers and teams. We've have some little tidbits of information I think that will really be helpful for you guys as you begin your planning session. But first, we cannot say more that you need to make sure you have your purposeful unit planning guide handy. As we've been talking to teams, we're realizing that everybody's kind of going straight to the lesson, and then they're going lesson by lesson. That is really not getting to the feeling, the overall understanding that we really need to make sure that we have all. We're really getting to our students, because you've got to think about what is my end goal, what is my target. So that's where we're going to start, is at that essential understanding.
That's true, because a lot of our teachers and their feedback are going, I'm getting behind and I'm not certain where I need to make the best decisions about how I'm going to try and stay on track. Because if we let every lesson take 2 days, you're cutting off half of the year's learning that students need to have, and that's, we know, won't be in their best interest. So part of what we're talking about here is how do we know we're making the best decisions. So as Debbie was starting off with, you got to start with what's your essential understanding. So
and because when it all comes to the end, you're responsible for giving that assessment at the end of the year, March, April, whenever it happens, and you want to make sure that you've taught the content that the best that you can. So it's about the content and the math, and it's not just, can I make it through this lesson, and getting just lesson by lesson thinking. So the first thing is on your instructional sequence, you're going to look at those essential understandings. What are those big math ideas? Think globally. You've got to start with the big picture first, and then you're going to work your way down. So once you know that, then you've got to then go to your learning progression, which is hyperlinked, and Lynette sends those out. But we've also put them on the portal, so if you didn't save it, it's on the portal. Go there, you can hit the link right away. Most of you guys have made yourselves printed copies, which is great. You just want to make sure you have the most up-to-date copies, because NBT, Numbers and Operations of Grade 10, and the Geometry were just updated last year. Most coaches were able to send those to teachers, but if you don't remember getting that, you might want to make sure, and especially NBT, I remember is March of 2015, so you want to make sure you have that one for sure. So as you're going through, you're going to read those learning progressions, you're going to go to your grade level, and you're going to look at the content that makes sense for your particular module that you're looking at, and we're going to talk more about that later. But that looking and reading that module will help you make sense of the math. I was at one grade level working with their team, and it was so funny because she had to admit, after I had them read through their learning progression, she's like, well, I know for the past 2 years you've been saying that we're supposed to be reading these learning progressions. And she goes, I hadn't really done it. She said, but now that I've done it, I realize now why you want us to read these learning progressions, because it really is getting to the math. That's what we have to remember. We are not teaching math just to get through this lesson. We're teaching our math so that kids are having that understanding of the foundations of math, and they're building onto that. It's all about how can I get that understanding to them. It's about them being able to talk and to reason and to discuss and to critique and use tools, and it's about the math practices.
So, and it's not enough that we just show them how it's done anymore either. They have to be able to know how to utilize that themselves, and if they make sense of it. So if we're going to understand truly what all of that means to have our students be able to do it, we've got to really understand the math. We know you can do it. It's not the inability to be able to do the math, but understanding what our students have to do to reflect their understanding. And our progressions are the best resource that we can tell you to go to help make sense of that.
So once you have that essential understanding, you have that learning progression, you're knowing more about how is it that I'm getting my kids to that understanding, to that thinking, Then you're going to go over here and you're going to now read your module overview. Your module overview now is the specifics, and that's where it's going to get into what's this topic A, what's topic B, what's topic C. And you're going to see how that is all connected because you've read that learning progression. And so you can see those connections between those topics. Then you're going to go through and you're going to make sure you take those assessments. We're finding that that is critical because that will give you the balance that you need to think about as you're looking at the unit. And then you get down to the meat of, okay, I've got this math understanding, I understand where I'm headed, but now I've got to have those team discussions. Teaching is not an individual event anymore. It is definitely a group, collaborative time. The more you're going to talk with somebody else, it's the more you're going to really understand that content and where's that purpose, what am I trying to do. So you need to have those team discussions, and now you actually can look at the lessons. But what we're recommending also is not just looking at the lessons, but just glancing and seeing how are they progressing. As I go through topic 1, how do each of these topics build on each other? How does topic B kind of support topic A? And you're looking for that thread that goes back to those essential understandings. How does this all connect to these essential understandings? So that's where you're going to get into looking at a chunk. It makes it a little more manageable. So you're starting with the unit or the module. Then you're going to be looking at these topics. And then within these topics, you're going to be making decisions about, okay, as I'm looking at this lesson, let's say there's 8 problems. I'm not going to get through all 8 on this first lesson. So I need to really be thoughtful and think, okay, let's do problem number 1 and problem 4 of these 8 problems, and they're the ones that we're going to talk about. We're going to have our discussions and critiquing and modeling and everything that we think of that we need to be able to do with those 2 problems. I don't have to go through all 8. Just like on the student pages, they don't have to do all the total front back of those student journal pages. In fact, I was at one 5th grade teacher, I think it was at Dodge. She's 5th grade, and she said, well, what I do is I give the kids, I tell them they have to do, and she picks one of the problem-solving problems, one of the word problems, first. And she's like, you got to do this problem first. Then she has kind of very thoughtfully chosen which ones from the rest of the pages, and those are the ones the kids have to do. Now if they get done and they can do some of the others, that's great, but she's intentionally made sure that they're doing that problem solving, because you guys know, I hate to say it, but when they get to that state assessment, what kind of problems are they going to be? There's going to be the problem solving ones. It's going to be those word problems. So if they never get to the word problem piece, they're missing a huge opportunity. So I thought that was a really good idea, so I'm trying to share that idea.
Yeah, you guys are always full of very good ideas. We like sharing them when we hear them.
I know. So basically, that's kind of what we have found that's been very helpful to teachers as they've been going through and trying to figure out how do I think about it, how do I structure it. If you get off a little bit, I don't think anybody's going to be having a cow about but you can't get very far off. And you have to start thinking about, okay, how can I make up this time? Because it is structured so that, for the most part, when you get to, April, May, you will have covered what needs to be covered. Mm-hmm. So
the majority of your major areas will be covered. Mm-hmm. But honestly, it takes the full year to teach your content. And as you have noticed, there are not a lot of cushion days that we were able to build in order to truly teach the content with this resource to the depth that we know it's taking us. So when you're making decisions to extend now, recognizing you're making a decision to cut something later. Mm-hmm. And
there's not a whole lot of cutting.
Right. And to know that we're making the wisest decisions means we have to inform ourselves to what we truly have to know and what's going to be measured. So we're trying to give you the most helpful advice we can, because we're trying to find any way we can to help give you information that would be beneficial.
And we've also been hearing from a lot of teachers, and especially some teachers that kind of really took on Engage in my last year a little bit more, is that it is very hard at the beginning, but they get better, their kids get better, and it will get easier. Will it ever be really easy? No. Teaching is going to be more difficult because we have to know the content. We have to be able to have those conversations with our teaching partners. So hopefully that helps clear up some things and get you to think about it's really about the mathematics and not just slogging through lessons.
This is true. So let's speak specifically to your module that is going on for you at this time. When we went through and glanced through your overview, we recognized that your key topics that you're going to focus on, especially at the beginning, are about measurement. And the measurement topics that you are going to be looking at with your students are about time, weight, and what they refer to as volume, liquid volume. We've also referred to as capacity in the past. And then the latter half of your module spends some time on rounding and computing addition and subtraction facts. So knowing that your fluency is inside your second half of the year, second half of the module, excuse me, that will have some important focus. But the primary focus of this unit is about getting some measurement understanding. Because the reality, when you read your progression, and if you, I just want to give you the heads up, when you go to the geometry measurement progression, most of that in third grade is about area and perimeter. Well, that's not what this module is about. Keep going down until you get to the latter part that refers to your weight, time, and capacity, information, and you will recognize that a lot of that has to do is they have to be able to solve word problems about these particular types of measurements. Well, that doesn't make any sense to kids unless they've experienced measuring. So that's what this module will help give kids that kind of background that they need. We'll talk to you about some of the pieces that need to kind of know to prepare for that. Because, for instance, part of the tools that we know are coming up in this module, some that are familiar, I think we've already been down the path with as a district, or has already been in your past module, but there are 10 frames, tape diagrams, place value charts, and a wide variety of measurement tools that have to do with the measurements that you are going to be focusing on. These are all tools that should have some familiarity to the students already. But what we have recognized is, and we are getting feedback about, is there are two different new focuses that may not have been a part of your student's background. So recognizing that the vertical number lines and horizontal number lines, the vertical may be new to them, and then what they use in here are called place value discs. So we're going to kind of like highlight some of these key pieces and things to think about, like your measurement tools. We know that in third grade you will not have in your math manipulative kit all of the measurement tools that they are referencing here. But we have recognized, and we have talked to our science colleagues, and they have assured us that between them and us, you should find the majority of the measurement tools that you will need for the lessons somewhere in your building.
Because it may not be at your grade level, but maybe at fourth grade or fifth grade or even second grade. They may have some of the beakers and the cylinders and the different capacity measures with the cups and stuff. So make sure you kind of talk to your coach. I know that Laura and Tony was saying that there are, in most buildings, there are science contacts at the different grade levels, so just make sure you utilize those, because most of these things will be in your building somewhere.
Yeah, because as you're surely well aware, we don't have the funds to put it in your specific classroom. So, but they are somewhere within the building, and you should be able to, with planning ahead of time, be able to gather what you need to instruct. Then another piece, the number lines. Debbie was going to kind of point out a couple of pictures here regarding how the horizontal and vertical number lines will be used.
I don't know if you can see them very well, but of course, as you guys know, the horizontal number line that comes up pretty much on topic A. So that's one that we're familiar with, and I think most people that, if you can see, I know it goes about, discusses time. And those of you that are old enough, you will remember when we had the summer school where we had the linear clock. And some of you are probably going, oh yeah, I remember the linear clock, that we had some lessons from summer school that goes exactly along with this, the horizontal number line when you're working with time. Then, here is a page that's showing the vertical number line. And the vertical number line is being used mostly with the liquid volume, with capacity. So they're talking about milliliters, liters, and they're showing that relationship on a vertical number line, which makes sense since when you're usually talking about liquid volume or capacity, you're going to be measuring in that vertical number, kind of in that vertical form. So representing that with a vertical number line makes a lot of sense. So those are the
well, those are the
different
primary
tools.
examples. That's in the area of measurement. But I do know that your vertical number line will come up again whenever you're doing your addition, subtraction, and your rounding. So because they're having you line your numbers up so that they can see similar place value relationship by going vertical instead of horizontal to be able to make decisions about rounding, order, etc. So it is a tool you'll use throughout this module in various ways. Okay, another tool that they use, since this is your first time to do place value with the Engage New York resources, is a device that they refer to as place value discs. And if you've looked at the lessons, you will see that every place value has these circular discs that either say that they are ones, tens, hundreds, etc. And then they just move the discs to the appropriate place in the place value to represent how many of that size unit is being represented in the number. They use, well, and Debbie's going to show you an example here of how we kind of have made an adaptation, because we thought it'd be a lot easier to cut out squares than it would be to cut out circles. And then we also noticed that all these circles were the same size. And we're going, that might confuse some of our kids that still have some fragile understandings about place value being 10 times greater or a tenth the size, depending on which way you're going to this neighbor and its relationship. So we wanted to give, in the squares, some proportional difference that says, the ones are smaller than the tens. So you will notice, well, Debbie's going to move the camera here because I think it'll still hear us as she moves it, and show you that with the squares, you will notice that in the number that she's going to show, lift a little higher, 2040, that you have 2 discs of size 1000 to represent why you have the 2 in the thousands place, and you have 4 discs of size 10 to represent why you have 4 in the tens place. Now, that is part of the way that they use it. They also use it to show why you regroup, etc. One of the things that we did, since this is something we created, is we gave a color coding that matches these place value aerobic cards, where you can expand, show expanded form of the value of the number, as well as collapse it into its standardized form. Anybody who's had Kim Sutton has experienced this aerobic place value. But we built one that went to the 100,000th place for our 4th grade and up experiences. And so we just decided to make a color coding match there in case that is going to be beneficial for kids who use both. But we did want to make you aware that we created these easier to cut out and use resources that you're welcome to use. They're on the portal. We're helping to make certain that your coaches are aware of where that's located in case you're not finding it. And if that can be a tool of benefit to you, it's an easy one to create. Between you, a pair of scissors, or a cutting board, and it doesn't take long to create what you need for your students.
But it is on the portal under instructional sequences. So you'll want to make sure you're under instructional sequences.
Because all of your resources you use to teach with are inside of that folder of the elementary documents on the math site. Okay, so the other piece, just a reminder, we know in the last module we kind of pointed out which specific concept cards from our vocabulary package you could use, but we know that you guys can make that kind of correlation yourself. But pay attention to the terminology that they have listed there. Try and make connections to resources that will help support their understanding, because whether it's English is your natural language or not, math is foreign to most. So there are some words there that are only understood in math, so you're just going to have to be specific about helping them understand the vocabulary. The other piece, we've mentioned the fact that you're going to have word problems with your students, and that's pretty significant in this particular resource that we're using, that you get that a lot. And we want to just remind once again that it is about helping students know how to break it down, figure out what's been given, what it is that they're missing, and how invaluable those thinking tools can be to this process. So once again, it's just a quick reminder that that tool, Engage New York doesn't know that we have it, but we know how valuable it can be. So just a reminder, they won't mention it, so we will.
And I know some people still had questions about tape diagrams. I've been getting that a lot. When you're doing a tape diagram, you want to make sure that, let's see, can you guys see that? You want to make sure that you're building that understanding about, as you're going through the diagram, you want to try to be as proportional as possible. It doesn't have to be exact, but it helps the students. So I think Lynette wrote this problem out, so if you want to kind of explain.
Well, in this case, it happens to be a, well, let's just go through it. Sarah earned $100 at the fair, and that was 4 times the amount that Jake had earned. So trying to figure out how much Jake had earned can be visually represented with a tape diagram. So you're looking at the relationship that between the two of them. So what you are noticing that Sarah earned more because it was intended to be a greater amount, but how much greater would then determine how many units of whatever size our unknown Jakes would be. So then this is kind of a division problem with a multiplication understanding, because as soon as you see the word times, you think that means multiply, and keywords can get us in a whole lot of trouble if we just focus on that, because this really is a division problem. But if you look at it, you can see how proportionally, I can see to Jake's 1, Sarah had 4, and her total being 100 means what of equal size could she have had 4 of to figure out what Jake's 1 of would be.
So I hope that clears it up a little bit. You can also do the same thing, of course, with addition, subtraction, multiplication, as well as this division piece. But they have their roots in the Singapore method of instruction. They call it the Singapore bar method or the Singapore bar model. That's pretty much where tape diagrams kind of have their root within that. But they use them quite frequently. Mm-hmm. It is listed in the standards that the students need to be familiar and be able to use it and be able to explain. So we wanted to make sure everybody had that understanding too. So
yeah. One of the things we also want to point out, and we're just kind of in general to everybody, but intentional experiences to all of the algorithms and strategies that we note are specifically stated within our learning progressions that students need to know how to use and understand deeply may not have as many intentional experiences inside of your Engage New York. And so that really falls upon us to make certain we have those opportunities for students to not just experience a standard algorithm that is part of our tradition here in the United States, but they also have the partials and the counting up and all those other strategies we know that help them to be fluent and flexible and able to compute. And so some of those places, just to continue the encouragement that this can happen, is you could naturally make it fit within a lesson if you see that happens, and even if they haven't specifically noted it. Or you could be purposeful in doing that in number talk opportunities, wherever you might place that, whether it be in your intervention or possibly in your warm-up of your core. All of those we feel are easy fits to try and address without being a whole separate day's lesson. But it all goes back to, I have to know that that's important, and if I don't see enough opportunity and my kids don't know this well enough yet, I've got to set up opportunities for them. So
of course, so that goes back to I have read that learning progression. I know the expectations. I know the math, and so I have to make sure that those things are in there. So
okay. So if you have any comments or questions that we could do to help better support you, please let us know. Thank you.
Thanks.